My name is Leah Mercer, and I was 34 the night my phone lit up like a medical alarm. It was late November in Boise, Idaho. Cold enough that the windows over my sink had started to fog from the steam of the kettle. Cold enough that the apartment felt smaller than it was, like winter had pressed the walls inward. I was standing barefoot on the kitchen tile, waiting for the water to boil after a 12-hour shift, when the phone I had not really expected to hear from ever again began to vibrate across the counter. Then it vibrated again.
And again.
At first, I thought it was a glitch, a spam burst, some system bug. But when I picked it up, I saw a name I had not seen in 6 years. My brother. Then my mother. Then 2 numbers from southern Kentucky I still recognized by area code, even though I had spent years teaching my body not to flinch at it. That 1 hour, my family called me 89 times. For 6 years, they had not called me once. Not when I finished my licensing exams. Not when I moved across the country. Not when I turned 30. Not when I got engaged. Not when I called my mother after my miscarriage, and she read the message and left it there like a body no one planned to claim. For 6 years, there had been nothing. Then all at once there was urgency.
Noise. Need.
That part was strange enough. But the strangest part was what my brother had found an hour before those calls started. And what I did after I found out. If you've ever come from the kind of family that only remembers your number when there's a crisis, you already know this story isn't really about phone calls. It's about roles. About what happens when a family decides early who you are and then never updates the script, even after you leave. To understand why my phone lit up 89 times that night, you have to understand what I had become while they were busy not looking. That afternoon, before the calls began, I had been in a patient's living room teaching a man how to help his wife breathe through panic without making her more afraid. I'm a palliative care nurse practitioner. My work is the part of medicine most people pray they'll never need and are profoundly grateful exists when they do. I walk into homes and hospital rooms at the point where control is already slipping. I explain things families are too scared to ask. I adjust medication. I lower voices. I make chaos quieter. I'm good at it. I know how to read the difference between pain and fear in a person's face. I know what guilt sounds like when it disguises itself as devotion. I know how families behave when they are exhausted, frightened, and looking for one competent person to absorb the whole gravity of what's happening. A month before that night, a regional health network had featured me in a story about a community palliative program I'd helped build for underserved counties. There was a photo of me in navy scrubs with my hair pinned back and that tired professional smile women in healthcare learn without meaning to. The article made me sound steadier than I feel most days. It talked about leadership, compassion, rural access, innovation. At home, there was Evan. There was our dog snoring under the table. There was a life I had assembled piece by piece, without anyone's permission. A small, ordinary, peaceful life. The kind that feels invisible to people who mistake drama for meaning. But to me it was enormous, because I had built every inch of it myself. In 6 years, I had become the person strangers trusted with the worst days of their lives. I just had one rule. I would never be that person for my family again. People always think no contact starts with some huge explosion. A holiday screaming match. A police report. A door slammed so hard it cracks the frame. Mine didn't start like that. Mine started with a sentence. Actually, maybe it started years before that, in the 1,000 little ways I learned what my job was in that house. I grew up in a small town outside Lexington. My father, Dale, did HVAC work when he was working and drank when he wasn't. My mother, Sharon, had perfected the kind of softness that made everyone else feel cruel for noticing how much she asked of them. And my older brother, Mason, was allowed to be a person. Allowed to get overwhelmed. Allowed to screw up. Allowed to need. I was not. I was the practical one. The calm one. The one who could handle things. At 15, I was the one calling the electric company because Dad had forgotten again. At 18, I was comparing insurance forms while studying for anatomy. At 21, I was driving my mother to urgent care, and then home again, and then back to work because nobody else in that family ever seemed able to move from panic into action. For a long time, I was proud of it. That's the ugly truth nobody likes to admit. When usefulness is the only thing that reliably earns you warmth, You learn to confuse being needed with being loved. You learn to feel tall or underweight. You learn to believe exhaustion is proof of character. It took me years of therapy to say this without wanting to defend them. I did not leave because they were always monstrous. I left because they were ordinary in the most dangerous way. They were the kind of people who could love you and still use you so continuously that you disappeared inside the function you served. The break came 6 years ago when I got accepted into a graduate nursing program in Idaho. It was the first thing in my life that belonged only to me. And right when that happened, my father got hurt at work, my parents fell behind on the mortgage, and the family quietly reached the conclusion it always reached when things went bad. Leah will fix it. The plan was never asked of me like a request. It was laid out like logistics. I would defer school for a year. I would stay local. I would help with appointments and bills. I would co-sign a consolidation loan because my credit was good, and that's what family does. I was 28, standing in my mother's kitchen, hearing the future I had clawed my way toward get repurposed in real time into another rescue mission. And I said no, not loudly, not dramatically, just no. My mother cried like I had struck her. My father stared at the table. And Mason said the line that finally split something in me clean down the middle. He said, "After everything this family has done for you, you can't do this one thing?" That sentence rearranged the room, because all at once, I understood that none of what I had carried in that house counted. Not the bills, not the driving, not the managing, not the years of quiet competence. In their story, I was still the daughter being helped, even while I was the one holding up half the structure. Within days, the family version of events hardened. Leah got selfish. Leah thinks she's better than us. Leah's too educated now. Leah would rather help strangers than her own parents. I didn't fight it. That was the only truly new thing I did. I left. I moved 1,000 miles away, started school, worked impossible hours, built a career, built a life, lost things, healed things, learned things. And over time, the silence from back home stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like proof that I had stepped outside a machine that only knew how to run on me. Then came the miscarriage. 2 years ago. 10 weeks along. One ultrasound, then another, then the quiet, careful language people in hospitals use when there's nothing left to save. I texted my mother from a bathroom stall because grief does weird things to old wiring. I sent one message. Just one. I lost the baby. She read it. She never replied. That was the moment the last excuse I had for them died. So, by the time my phone began ringing that November night, I was not waiting around for reconciliation. I was not secretly hoping 6 years of silence had been a misunderstanding. I knew exactly what silence meant, which is why the first thing I felt when the calls started wasn't hope. It was dread. The very first message was from Mason. There was no hey. No warning. Just a link. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. And, while I was staring, I made a mistake. I checked the old family group thread. I had never technically left, just muted and buried so deep it might as well have been underwater. It was active. Messages climbing fast. My mother. 2 aunts. Mason. A cousin I hadn't seen since I was 26. The thread was boiling for 20 minutes straight. Then, while I watched, it died. No gradual slowdown. No sign-off. Just silence. Instant and total. As if somebody had walked into a loud room, said one hard, true thing, and every mouth in it had closed. Evan came in from the living room because the kettle had started screaming and I hadn't moved. He turned off the burner and looked at me, then at the phone, then back at me. "Who is it?" he asked. "My family," I said. He knows what that means. So he didn't ask if that was good. He just stayed there, quiet, while I finally opened the link. It was the article, the feature from the Health Network. My photo, my credentials, my program, my name in the headline. And I understood everything in one cold breath. Mason had not searched for me because he missed me. He had gone looking for a solution to something, and he had found that his estranged sister was no longer just the difficult daughter who left. I was licensed, experienced, awarded, publicly competent, easy to identify, easy to contact. Whatever was happening back there, they had found out that the person they erased 6 years ago had become exactly the kind of professional they needed now. That was why the family chat went silent. Because you can't spend years telling a story about someone being selfish and failed and cruel, then suddenly discover she's thriving, respected, and highly useful. That kind of information blows a hole in the myth. Then everybody scrambles to rewrite the person, not as daughter maybe, but at least as resource. That's when the calls really started coming. My mother, Mason, unknown numbers from home, my Aunt Carla, then Mason again. Then the house landline, which I had not seen flash on my screen in over a decade. They came in stacked so tight, I could barely clear one before the next arrived. Voicemails dropping in. Texts piling up. My screen looked frantic.
Hungry.
I didn't answer. At first. I stood in my kitchen and watched the count climb.
10.
21. 36. 50. By the time I turned the ringer off, it was already over 60. Evan asked the question I couldn't yet answer. What do they want? I said, I don't know, but it has to be bad. Because here's what struck me hardest. Not one of them led with the reason. Not one voicemail started with "we're sorry." Not one text said, please. Not one message did me the basic dignity of explaining why 6 years of silence had just turned into pursuit. It felt less like love and more like a door they believed still belonged to them. Finally, I listened to my mother's voicemail. Her voice sounded older.
Thinner.
Wet with crying. She said my name twice, and for one stupid, involuntary second, some very young part of me leaned toward it. Then she told me. My father had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. They had found it late. Of course they had. He had ignored symptoms until ignoring them was no longer physically possible. He was already home. Already declining. Already in pain. And then came the line that told me, more clearly than anything else, exactly where I stood. She said, you do this now, honey. You know how to take care of this kind of thing. We need you to come home and handle it.
Handle it.
There it was. The old family word. The whole roll, in one neat little package. Not, your father is dying, and he wants to see you. Not, I know we don't deserve this, but we're scared. Not, can you forgive us enough to talk? Just, you know how to do this. Come handle it. I set the phone down and looked at Evan. What do they want? He asked again. I said, they want me to manage my father's death. And the awful part, the truly awful part, was that some part of me wanted to go. Not because they deserved me, because I know what a bad death looks like. I know what uncontrolled pain does to a room. I know what happens when frightened family members take turns over-medicating and under-medicating someone because nobody can read the signs correctly. I know how noise hurts people near the end. I know how lasting the memory of a chaotic death can be for everyone left alive afterward. I could ignore Mason. I could not ignore what I knew. When he called again, I answered. Maybe because he was the one who'd found me. Maybe because some broken old part of me still wanted my older brother to sound relieved to hear my voice. He didn't. There was no hello. He said, so you are alive. I said nothing. He barreled on. He was tired, angry, half breathless.
He said Dad was slipping.
Mom was a wreck. Hospice had been mentioned, but they didn't understand any of it. He said he had taken unpaid leave already. He said they couldn't keep doing this. Then he hit the real center of it. You have to come, he said. You're the only one who knows what to do. Not the only one he loved. The only one who knew what to do. Then, like a knife he'd been saving, he added, family isn't something you get to walk away from forever and still call yourself a good person. That line sat between us. And standing there in my own quiet kitchen, with my own warm lights and my own life all around me, I understood what the night really was. It was not reconciliation. It was retrieval. They were drowning, and they had remembered the name of the person they used to throw into deep water first. That night, I said no to the panic. I did not book a flight out of reflex. I did not let guilt buy the ticket. I sat down at the table with my laptop and forced myself to make the decision as the woman I had become, not the daughter I had been trained to be. I booked a round trip. 14 days. Not open-ended. Not until further notice. 14 days with a fixed return date, already chosen, already paid for. Then I printed the confirmation and folded it into my coat pocket like a boundary I could physically touch. I told Evan, if they try to make me stay longer, if they act like this date is negotiable, I'll know nothing actually changed. He asked, do you think they will? I said, yes. I flew out 2 days later. Boise to Nashville, Nashville to Lexington, the landscape flattening and darkening underneath me the farther east I went. Somewhere over the middle of the country, I touched the folded paper in my pocket and reminded myself what it meant. I am going to care. I am not going to surrender. I am showing up. I am not moving back. My mother cried when she saw me. Mason hugged me at the airport like we were in a movie about siblings who found their way back to each other. The performance lasted about 11 minutes. By the time we were halfway to the house, he was already giving me updates like I was incoming staff. Medication names. Nighttime agitation. Bills. A hospital bed in the den. My aunt rotating meals. Mom not sleeping. He mentioned my old room had been made up for me for as long as it takes. For as long as it takes. I felt the paper in my pocket and said nothing. The house looked exactly the same. Same porch swing. Same peeling trim. Same smell when I stepped inside. Coffee, old upholstery, dust, and something under it that I have never been able to name except to say that it smells like childhood mixed with tension. My mother came out of the kitchen thinner than I remembered. Smaller. More fragile. She took my face in both hands, crying. And for 1 second, it almost felt like a real homecoming. Then, with her hands still on my face, before I had taken off my coat, she said, "Thank God. Can you stay through Christmas? I can't do this. I need you here. Not I missed you. Not I'm sorry. Not I should have answered when you needed me." The third sentence out of her mouth was already the ask. That told me everything. Then I heard him. From the den. The wet, uneven breathing I know before I see it. The effortful pull of a body nearing its edge. My father. I walked into the room and there he was, or what was left of the man I remembered. Cancer had taken the bulk of him, the color of him, the force of him. He lay propped in a rented bed where the recliner used to be, skin sallow, wrists small, eyes too alert in a face that had lost almost everything else. He looked at me, and I made the mistake people like me always make. I hoped. Not for a miracle. Not even for healing. Just for one human sentence big enough to hold 6 years. He opened his mouth and said, "Good. Your brother's been screwing the meds up." That was it. That was the reunion. Not daughter. Not Leah. Not I'm glad you came. Just competency. Just correction. Just the old assignment wearing the face of urgency. And because my work lives below thought now, I crossed the room and put my fingers to his wrist before I had fully decided what it meant that I was doing it. His pulse was fast and thin. His mouth was dry. His fentanyl schedule had big gaps in it. His breakthrough doses were badly managed. By the end of the first hour, I had checked his orders, talked to the on-call nurse, adjusted the timing within the prescribed parameters, shown Mason how to turn him safely, shown my mother how to wet his lips without making him cough, dimmed the lights, lowered the noise, and changed the atmosphere of the room from frantic to manageable. That night my father slept. Actually slept. My mother stood in the doorway and cried watching him rest. And for 10 minutes, I let myself feel the clean relief of having made something terrible less terrible. 10 minutes. Then my mother said to Mason, not quietly, "See? I told you only Leah could do this." And then to me in the same breath, "So you'll stay." Now. There it was. My skill wasn't being received as a gift. It was being entered as evidence against me. Look how good she is. Therefore she must continue. Therefore she must remain. Therefore she cannot leave. The better I was, the tighter the trap. The next morning, my mother brought me a folder at the kitchen table. Not old photos. Not a letter. Not anything sentimental. Paperwork. Bills. Insurance notices. An unsigned form appointing a family caregiver representative. Another document flagging financial responsibility. Tabs already placed where she wanted my signature. She tried to explain it gently. Mason had missed too much work. Dad's disability money was nothing. They needed someone stable, someone reliable, someone with a professional background who could step in properly. Then I saw it on the refrigerator. My article, printed out. My face smiling down above my title and credentials, held there by a magnet shaped like a peach. Not displayed with pride. Displayed like valuation. Like proof of what the asset was worth. I picked up the folder and read it carefully line by line because that is how I survive things. I read before I agree. I read before I absorb. I read before I let anyone rename obligation as love. Then I set it down. I will take care of him while I'm here, I said. I will not sign this. I will not take on the debt. I will not quit my job. I will not move back. My mother's face changed in real time. Relief first, because I had said I'd care for him. Then disappointment. Then that colder, older look people get when they realize the lever they usually pull won't move the machinery this time. I knew they wouldn't stop there. Families like mine never stop at paperwork if there's a softer spot available. Mason found the softer spot. He found my return flight. I had left the folded itinerary in the inside pocket of my coat, hanging by the door. That evening, I came downstairs and found him holding it. "What is this?" he asked, though he obviously knew. "My flight home," I said. His face flattened. "You already booked your way out?" "I booked my way back," I said. That's when the whole house turned toward the ticket the way I had known they would. My mother started crying again. My aunt went silent in that judgmental church lady way. Mason held the paper like it was proof of betrayal. "Dad is dying," he said. "And you're planning your exit." No, I thought. I'm planning my survival. But I didn't say that. I walked over, took the paper gently from his hand, folded it back along its lines, and put it in my pocket over my heart. In that moment, something settled in me. Cold, clear, final. Because they had done exactly what I predicted. They had gone for the ending. Not because they wanted more time with me. Because what they could not tolerate was the fact that my role in their crisis already had a limit. That night, I found Mason in the laundry room crying. Real crying. Not angry crying. Not manipulative crying. The ugly folded over kind that comes out when a person is too tired to hold shape. And for 1 minute I saw him. Not as the brother who helped enforce the system. Not as the accuser. Just as a man who had stayed inside the burning house too long. He said, "You have no idea what it's been like." And he was right. Not fully. He had quit showing up for himself in order to keep showing up for them. He looked older than 37. Hollowed out. Wrung dry. Then he said the truest thing he said the whole time I was there. "You got to leave and become the good version of what this family needed." I stayed and became the wrecked version. That one hurt, because it was true enough to matter. For 1 full minute, we were almost brother and sister again. Then he wiped his face and said, "So now you owe me. Sign the forms." And there it was, the machine restarting. On day 12, my father began to actively die. I knew it before anyone said it aloud. The breathing pattern shifted. His feet modeled. He slept more, woke less, drifted inward. I also knew there might be one last clear window left. One more stretch where he might surface enough to speak. So I told them, "If anyone wants to talk to him," I said, "soon would be best." And just like that, the room filled. My mother, Mason, 2 aunts, a cousin. Everyone gathering around the bed, like a final scene was something you could schedule if you crowded close enough. And I hated what rose in me then. Hope. Even after everything, I still wanted one sentence. One honest sentence. One moment in which my father might see me as something other than function. The window came late the next afternoon. Gray light. Quiet room. Family pressed around the bed. My father opened his eyes clearer than they had been in days, and looked slowly from face to face until he found me in the corner. Everything in the room held still. This was it. His last clear chance. My last chance to hear something I could carry home without it cutting me. He looked straight at me and said, with what strength he had left, "Stay with your mother after I'm gone. You're the strong one. That's your job." That's your job. Not who I was. Not what he loved. What I was for. Even then, Even at the edge of his life, even with death burning away everything unnecessary, the truest thing my father could think to give me was an assignment. And the worst part was that he said it almost tenderly, as if naming me strong was kindness and not the same burden I had been breaking under since I was a child. My mother took that sentence and ran with it. "You heard him," she whispered. Mason reached for the folder on the side table. "Just sign," he said. "If not for us, for him." There it was. The whole choice laid across a dying man's blanket. A father's approval. A family role. A final wish. A trap dressed in grief. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at my father. And I didn't pick it up. I put my hand over his instead and said, as steadily as I have ever said anything in my life, "I will care for you. I will not give you the rest of my life to prove that I loved you." Nobody spoke. Then I did the only thing that was ever really mine to offer. I nursed him. I checked his mouth. I watched his breathing. I timed the medication. I lowered the lamp. I told my mother when to step back. I told Mason when to stop talking because the room was getting louder than the body needed. I held my father's hand as his pulse thinned and his breath spaced out and then, just after midnight, stopped. I gave him a peaceful death. Not because I owed it, because I chose it. And in the same hour, I finally let go of the fantasy that there had ever been an apology waiting at the far end of all this, if I was only dutiful enough to earn it. The next morning, the house began reaching for me again. Funeral arrangements, paperwork, finances, my mother, the house, the debts, everything humming with the same assumption it always had. Of course, Leah will take over now. I stood up from the chair beside my father's bed, straightened his blanket one last time, and touched the folded return itinerary in my pocket. 2 days later, I left. Mason tried to block the doorway when he saw my bag. "You're leaving now?" he said. "He's barely gone." I said, "I came to care for Dad. I did that. The rest was never mine." My mother cried. My aunt stared. Mason called my name like it was an accusation. I did not sign anything. I did not stay. I did not explain myself one more time for people committed to misunderstanding me as long as misunderstanding was profitable. I walked out. When the plane lifted, I looked down at the land getting smaller beneath the wing and understood something I had not understood when I first left 6 years earlier. Back then, leaving had been survival. This time, leaving was freedom, because the first time I walked away, I was still organized around them, still defined by the role I rejected, still carrying them in the center of me as the thing I was escaping. This time, I had gone back, given what I chose to give, refused what was never mine, and left without needing them to agree that I was right. That changed everything. I'm back in Idaho now. I still do the work I was called to do. I still train younger nurses. I still sit in rooms where families are terrified and try to make the air gentler. Last month, I stood behind a new NP while she guided a husband through his wife's final hours with more grace than she believed she had in her. Watching her, I thought, this is the chain going the other way. This is what it looks like to pass down care without passing down self-erasure. Mason still texts. There's always a reason. Estate nonsense. A roofing issue. Mom's blood pressure. The endless small emergencies of people who believe competence is communal property. Sometimes I answer. Sometimes I don't. But now, when the phone lights up, my chest doesn't drop through the floor. It's just a phone. That is a small sentence. If you've never lived this kind of life, it probably sounds like nothing. But if you have, if you were the one who handled things, the one who absorbed the panic, the one whose love was always measured by how much weight you could carry, then you know that a phone becoming just a phone is no small miracle. It means the old system no longer has first claim on your nervous system. It means you can love people and still refuse to become their infrastructure. It means you can show up for the ending and still go home after. And that was the thing I had to learn at 34 in one November, after 89 desperate calls from people who did not come looking when I was breaking, but remembered my number the second I looked strong enough to save them. I went. I cared. I left. And for the first time in my life, all 3 of those choices belonged to me.